Hey everyone, Matt Sitter here, CEO of AFN. At AFN, our fundamental belief is that change is where opportunity happens. And the best way to find opportunity in change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. At AFN, we consistently seek out a global perspective as innovations depend on the needs and constraints of different populations in the world. Today, I'm really excited to talk about Africa as a continent of opportunity. It represents a tremendous example of diversity and opportunity, and some statistics that have struck me about the continent of Africa. Population of nearly 1.5 billion people, and it's growing an additional 100 million people every 3 years across 53 countries and a diverse collection of peoples and languages. Half of the population is under the age of 19, 2/3 under the age of 25. The GDP currently is just over $3 trillion, and it's expected to be nearly 30 trillion by 2050. And it's the second fastest growing region in the world after Asia. But what we know is that population growth in Asia has gone negative in many parts. And so Africa really is going to be a dynamic place for growth in the future. I've got 6 friends with us today for the conversation. I'll do a brief introduction to all of them, and then we'll get into our conversation. Afam, Onyema, CEO of GEANCO Foundation. They're a nonprofit focused on health and education in Africa, focused primarily in Nigeria. Some of their big programs include maternal health, anemia management, and surgical missions. And Afam is absolutely an inspiration in creating a movement that prominent people can get involved with. So there's a lot that we can learn from Afam in a variety of different areas. We have Dr. Alice Amegah with us as well. She's an education specialist at the World Bank. She came to the World Bank via Oxford and Cambridge with extensive experience in education and international development. And we're fortunate to have her through Patrick Asare. They're from the same small village in Ghana. So that is very cool for us to be able to see that type of connection. Patrick is principal at UGI Energy Services and author of the book, The Boy from Badua. He emigrated to the US by way of Africa, and he has extensive experience in energy and education. We've got Debo Omololu. He's CEO of GFA Technologies. They're a software company that creates software solutions for SMEs and startups. He's also the 2022 winner of the Carpe Diem Award for AFN. We really feel like he sees the day in terms of being able to promote entrepreneurialism in Africa. And then finally, Nihal Shah, CEO of Biodeal's Laboratories in Kenya. He's a second-generation leader of a company focused on pharmaceutical and health product manufacturing and distribution. So this is an awesome... Oh, and Derek. Didn't mention Derek. Derek, he's a C-level consultant and member of multiple advisory boards and former CEO of 3G Mobile. Awesome to have you guys all here. We've got you from different parts of the world, which is amazing. Very different backgrounds and expertise as well, which is really what we wanted to be able to get to. And the 2 topics that we want to be able to dive into as much as possible is, where do you see opportunities in Africa and why? And what are some of the barriers that we want to overcome in order to realize those opportunities? So, Nihal, let's start with you. When you're thinking about some of the opportunities in Kenya and beyond, and with your company, you're starting to supply in many different parts of the world. Where do you see the opportunities going for your business and the marketplace generally?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. The big opportunities in pharmaceuticals, healthcare right now is literally happening as we speak. We're having a lot of right now, for example, our presidents in the USA, so I know we're talking about pharmaceuticals, and they are actually talking of making Kenya the pharmaceutical hub for Africa manufacturing. So there's some sort of talk around that. We have the African Medicines Agency coming through into Rwanda, Kigali, and just north of us in Ethiopia, we have the African Union. So when you look at policies, when we look at cross-border, when we look at unfortunately, giant climate change, but the opportunities that climate change are bringing us around healthcare, it is an opportunity. And certainly within East African community, we're having a whole raft of custom unions, conglomeration, so it makes trade easy for us. So these are all driving most of the opportunities that we see coming my way for the next 5-10 years.
Excellent. Yeah. Great to hear. Since we started off talking about healthcare, Afam, as you're thinking about the opportunities in Africa, you've spent a lot of work making sure that healthcare services can be delivered to Africa. How are you thinking about some of the things that you're seeing in Nigeria in terms of healthcare services? And in particular, the entrepreneurialism that you've fostered in maternal health would be interesting to hear about too.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's correlates to your second question about challenges and obstacles, and healthcare certainly is a huge one. You can't really advance economically, politically, otherwise if you don't have a healthy population. And we focus, we do our medical missions, but we also do a lot with maternal health and infant health. And there's so many studies that prove that you can't do anything in society if women aren't, safely delivering healthy babies, and those babies aren't living healthily through age 5. And so we took the entrepreneurial route in terms of building clinics, taking these 40-foot shipping containers, turning them into medical clinics. And we're doing it obviously on a philanthropic lens, but the government has to do much more. The investment in healthcare is so poor in Nigeria. I can't really speak to all of Africa, but I would venture to guess that it's equally poor in all those areas, all different countries. And so there has to be a vast investment in primary healthcare and women and children, lowering infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates. And so we see the benefit of the local villages and the states where we work when we have these clinics and women are delivering safely. And it's really a whole ecosystem. So for our clinics, we build the clinic and donate it or give it to a local midwife and nurse who runs it as a business. So patients come and pay her for services, which is very important. And then she can charge a little bit more because of the quality of the clinic we're giving her. But in the end, she has to sustain with that service, herself. She hires other nurses and pays for, replacing, medicines and buying what have you. So we really see it as really helping the whole local economic ecosystem through these clinics. And so we tell our donors, you're putting money in to buy a clinic, but I'm not going to come back to you next year and say, please give us more money so we can hire more nurses. And so I think thinking about it in that lens, being creative and trying to do these partnerships where we're not just putting a white elephant project on the ground and saying, here's a brand new hospital or a new clinic, and 5 years it gets run down. The local community has ownership, and the local nurse and midwife literally has ownership. And we're there to manage high quality. We're there to manage oversight. We're there to make sure that she's well trained. And so, yeah, I think if we can have more models like that, partnering with the government in terms of, how can we kind of fill in the gaps, but realizing that you have the primary responsibility. So, yeah.
Okay. So tremendous opportunity just in terms of, creating additional stability through infant and maternal care. And obviously there's 2 elements of training around that. You've got making sure that they're a competent healthcare worker, but you're also trying to make sure that they are a competent business person. Do you give them training on business basics as well?
Yeah, great question. And we do. Our team, I have a team fully committed to this clinical program. And the first thing they do is identify nurses who are good at what they do. They have patients who believe in them. They've delivered babies. They've worked with mothers for years, if not decades. So we know they have the medical prowess. And then we put them into training boot camps, everything from how to upload data online. So I can ask my team how many babies were delivered in Clinic 2 in November 2022. We can get that answer, but also balancing their books. We start savings accounts, take them to a local bank and start savings accounts and saying any excess money. And the fact that they have excess money from these programs is great. But instead of just putting under a mattress or just leaving it, they're investing money. And we're really hands-on with the program. And yeah, it's really, they're better business people, better business women because they're in this program. And that's equally important to us as making sure their medical skills and their medical services are high quality as well.
Excellent. Debo, you're all about opportunity, thinking about how investment can change in Africa, but also how we can support small businesses there. Give us a little bit of your view on where you're seeing opportunities being realized in some of the areas of Africa where you're working right now.
So Matt, you actually mentioned a few things at the start of, the entire discussion. And if we look at the tangent and the point, it then gives us an indication of the opportunities that exist. The continent of Africa currently has, as you said, between 1.3 and 1.5 billion people. The estimates are that by 2050, this number would have doubled. So pretty much 2.6 billion people. You also said correctly, 60% of the population is under the age of 25 currently. And what the World Bank then says is that by 2050, 40% of the world's total workforce will come from Africa. And so when you look at it that way, the question then becomes, what opportunities are there? What models are there that have impacted the world? I like to actually point to India. India, I was talking to a CTO of one of the global tech companies, and he said as a joke, but it's kind of like true, that today, if you don't have an Indian in a technology company, is it really a technology company? But what India did and what they did successfully over the last 20, 30 years has been to provide skills to people, especially in the area of technology, and then enable people to outsource a lot of stuff. Now, what is gradually happening is that from an African perspective and context, you now have more companies looking to outsource a lot of skills and jobs to Africa to even help lower cost. So outsourcing is becoming very, very important. So if you even look at it just purely from an American perspective, millions of companies start businesses every single year in the US, and many of them would just want to focus on a core area or their core business and then outsource the rest. So everything from financial accounting to even things like website development or, data entry and stuff like that. So you now have lots of people, especially Africans, who are working remotely. So they could be in some city in Nairobi or in Kenya or in Gaborone in Botswana, living in there but providing services to American firms. And so you have this to American firms, to German firms, Swedish firms, etc. So this is a trend that I see as something that is going to continue to happen over the next potentially 2-3 decades from now. So that's the area where I see huge opportunity.
Okay, so outsourcing, and it sounds like primarily knowledge work, whereas when we think about China's rise, it was fueled by a lot of manufacturing and then went over to knowledge work. The India example, I think, is an interesting one. They have, on the very high end of the knowledge work, their educational institutions, they've spent a lot of time and money developing those over time. Do you see any sort of parallels being put forward in Africa where technical institutions are being promoted and supported?
Yes, several African countries have actually kicked off initiatives. One of the most popular ones is from Nigeria. The federal government, through the Office of the Vice President, as well as the Minister of Communications, have put forward a few programs. One is called Outsource to Nigeria Initiative. The other is called 3MTT, for 3 million trained talents, something like that. Forgive me if I've mixed it up. And basically, these initiatives are focused around, on the one hand, creating skills, first of all, at the entry level and also at the mid-level. And then gradually now providing more and more experience for these people to also rise up. And then you also even have in some other countries, like in South Africa as well, where the DCDT, Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, also has such programs that help to promote that development of people. Now, it's not going to happen, it's not going to switch immediately and then you have CEOs who are Nigerians. You do have that, but gradually, especially from a technology point of view, Nigeria has said, for example, publicly, that they do plan to partner with many others, and just purely because of demographics, they expect to actually overtake India eventually as the largest provider of outsourcing. Now, countries like Nigeria that have the biggest populations in Africa are very, very likely to be well positioned to take advantage of that.
Alice, I think that we're probably hitting right on your areas of expertise in terms of, I know you're doing work with respect to India right now, but you got deep expertise in education and development. Maybe if you could build on Debo's point a little bit and tell us a little bit where you think the opportunities are coming from and how education is a key enabler for that.
Thank you very much, Matt. Hello, everyone. Yeah, Debo does make some critical points, as everyone has done so far. I think that most of the points are bordering around supply as well as the demand in the labor markets in sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, but with specific large market hubs like South Africa and Nigeria. I think that with where the world is going, we know that digital skills is on high demand with technological advancement, innovation, and also areas like green skills because of the impact of climate change. And so most of the focus is on these major skills, but also the increasing demand of creative skills within the ecosystem of youthful creativity is also growing very much in sub-Saharan Africa. And so these are the three main buckets of skills areas that are in high demand, but also would need more development within the African context, especially because we see that Africa is developing in education, but the progress have been very largely focused around basic foundational skills. And so we are beginning to advise countries to look at, or even entrepreneurs or investors to look at advanced skills within the ecosystems of STEM, technology, engineering, mathematics, which then pivot back to green skills, digital skills, to ensure that the population boom that we are seeing becomes a dividend rather than have other adverse effects on the impact of young people, especially. For me as a young person, Africa is definitely a place where young people are hungry for success, young people are innovative, young people are creating. And so for Africa to leapfrog the different stages of development beyond the 21st century development by the fourth industrial revolution, we've seen innovative ideas in the areas of fintech. We are seeing the influx development of using simple mobile phone devices and the access to internet, to the development of ideas that are locally tailored for the needs and available resources within the African context. So I feel like, and I believe that with the right source of investment, which in most instances the focus is on government and public investment, but this would be a great opportunity. And I know there are many on this call and others who would listen who have the potential to invest in some of these areas to ensure that the world is ready to take positive advantage of the youthful population boom that we are seeing in Africa, and we'll see in the next 3 to 5 decades to come. Yeah.
So we've definitely talked about the supply side in terms of, hey, there's going to be a lot of talent that's waiting there. If we're, Debo brought up, population of Africa is likely to double in short order. That could make it a consumer powerhouse as well.
Markets.
Where do you see some of the big consumer needs that, and obviously the constraints are different in many parts of Africa than you've got in other parts of the world. And so the type of innovation that's required may be different. Where are some of the areas that you think that consumer opportunities are?
Well, I think definitely technology is a big market in Africa. every school would need computers, every school would need young people would need laptops, companies will need these resources to leapfrog or even to advance on the current works that they are doing. And so I think that Africa would be a great market for technological boom, but also across all other areas, including agriculture. And so we are talking about climate smart agriculture to again leapfrog the regular weather patterns for which most subsistence farmers use, to more large-scale agriculture production and manufacturing. I think one of the areas that we see the market booming, of course, is health, which I think Afam has rightly stated. I mean, Africa is not going to we're not consuming only health resources from the West, but also producing our own health resources and using it ourselves would be very critical. I think when population booms, the issue of infrastructure as well. And so there'll be a lot of need for construction, building climate resilient infrastructure, transportation. And so there are a lot of car manufacturing industries going back to Africa to produce cars, and looking at energy efficient types of transportation, which of course with the population boom, there will definitely be a lot of people demanding for electric bikes, electric cars, and other means of transportation. So these are the areas where I see the market really growing fast as it is now.
Excellent. So like technological and physical infrastructure, certainly big opportunities going forward. Patrick, as you're thinking about the opportunities, so you emigrated to United States quite a while ago, but looking at the lens of how you grew up in Ghana versus what you're seeing right now, where are you seeing some of the opportunities?
Yes. So as you've heard from everyone that has spoken, Africa is starting from a very low base. And so, you combine the demographic dividend we have and all the, needs that have been so well articulated. I mean, it's starting from so the growth, global growth, a lot of that is going to come from Africa in the next, few centuries, in the next few decades. I mean, you look at China, that was growing about 10% per year. In the last couple of decades, now they've stalled. I mean, they're lucky to get about 4 or 5% currently. But you look at African sort of economic growth. I mean, those are still, many of them are still in their high digits. So all of these areas, I mean, education, healthcare, energy. Energy is really what I know. And for me, that is where the most opportunities, I mean, one of the biggest sources of opportunity, because you take every African country, I mean, Ghana, Nigeria, the western part of the continent, you go to South Africa, which is the, for the longest time, has been the economic powerhouse. I mean, you cannot believe the amount of challenges they are having with their energy systems and having enough sort of energy to power their industry. So that is one of, for me, that's one of the main areas of focus. I mean, that's governments lead a lot of that infrastructure because it's very capital intensive. But you look at all the weak governments we have in Africa now and, struggles with sources of funding. I think that is one area where the private sector can increasingly play a role. So you talk about, new sources of energy, green energy. We talk a lot about solar. I mean, wind energy is not a big thing in Africa today. I'm not sure why. I mean, we do have wind in Africa like everywhere else, but for some reason, I mean, we don't hear too much about wind energy. I mean, solar, of course. I mean, Africa, Ghana, Nigeria lie right on top of the equator, and so there is a lot of sunshine 365 days a year. So that's a big area where a lot of people are looking. So that in the field of energy, I think that's for me where a lot of the opportunities for growth and development, and I would add on top of that education and healthcare, because those are two big areas. So I'm glad to hear some of the panelists are working in that area. But I'll have probably a couple of questions for you, Afam, as we go along. But so that's in brief. That's what I
and Patrick, you've done a great job of educating me a little bit on the dynamic between generation and transmission. So
yes.
It seems like, there's certainly ways that generation can happen right now, but transmission is a problem within many parts of Africa. Can you just describe that a little bit further?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So with all the challenges that we have, I mean, there's blackouts everywhere in Africa, and we've always thought, I mean, generation, because generation is where the electricity comes from. The power plant, that's where you're generating the electricity. But when you generate it, you have to actually transport it. So there's a transmission system. And then the high voltage transmission system, you bring it into the population centers, where you have to, then transform the voltage down to the level where households consume. So that's the distribution system. And that is, I mean, if you go to Ghana, you go to Nigeria, all the countries that are having problems with energy, the distribution system is where the problems are located. So you can build all the generation you want, and that's a mistake Ghana has made. I mean, we built a generation that is twice what demand level is, but because we cannot distribute the power efficiently, there's a lot of losses in the distribution system. So, you send the power to somebody's factory or somebody's home. I mean, you actually have to meter it, measure how much you're sending to a consumer, and then at the end of the month, collect your bills. I mean, that basic function is not happening, and that's the crux of the problem everywhere in Africa. So if you are not collecting revenues in the distribution system, then you cannot pay back the people at the top end of the chain, and then the whole system collapses. So that's where so those are the areas where the continent really needs a big focus. And
well, and arguably, like, that's the less sexy part of energy, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Derek, I'm hoping you can come back on video. Hey, there you are. From your perspective, just talking about opportunities. So you've spent a lot of time focused on mobile. Alice brought that up as a massive opportunity, but where are you seeing opportunities from your perspective? And I think you're more focused on the southern end of the continent.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. So with my travels and with consulting with many African countries, what I've seen is there's a lost natural resources into Africa, with a big cultural diversity, hosting some of the world's fastest growing economies. I mean, there's 54 countries in Africa, which the US and the UK are tapping into as well. But there's technology, there's agriculture, there's energy, fast growing. There's increase in foreign and direct investment, improvement in infrastructure, which is happening over the last couple of years, a growing middle class, which is also contributing to the rise of Africa as well, and as well as the 2018 Africa Continental Free Trade Area that's happening between countries as well, which is opening up abilities to trade in between Africa as well. And then I'm seeing a lot of partnerships, acquisitions, and greenfield investments from foreign nationals coming into the continent as well. And then also looking back at home in South Africa, the rise of Cape Town as well. So Cape Town is becoming a hub for Africa, as well as Nairobi and Kenya as well, those areas into Africa. But looking at home in South Africa, those areas are fluctuating, and lots of foreign economy coming into the markets as well. Alice and Patrick touched on the topic as well that I wanted to talk on, was leapfrogging technology into Africa as well. So if you just look at mobile M-Pesa and mobile phones and what's happening with mobile payments, it streaks ahead of anything that I've seen anywhere in the world. They've just had to leapfrog technology to self-sustain and you can do some amazing things. You can buy pay as you go, solar, mobile solutions, everything on your phone. It's a lot like China, but amazing for an Africa nation as well, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is well taken. We brought up there's a lower base there, but what that means is that you don't have to put down phone lines absolutely everywhere to get the mobile connections.
Exactly. You know, the infrastructure is growing, and it is with all the undersea cables that are coming into Africa now. It's leapfrogging technology everywhere. 5G is just enabling everyone to scale.
I think that the transmission lines, interesting point. I think it was last month, like 4 of the 5 had issues or something like that. Can you just tell us a little bit about that sort of challenge and what it means for staying connected?
Sure. So actually 4 of the 6 lines coming to South Africa were down just underneath the Horn of Africa, which means to enable capacity into Cape Town, into the western area of Cape Town, and the load of the capacity you had to take on was on the eastern side. So the lines were flooded and very saturated on both sides of the country, or the continent. But in the top end of the continent, lines were still down, and the top half of Africa still as we speak, are battling with connectivity, and the economies are getting really messed up because of these lines. You know, when the countries are relying on these lines for economic growth, and these lines go down 6-12 weeks at a time, it just stunts the countries.
Sure. So things like Starlink, let's say Elon Musk's company in the lake, how are they doing in terms of providing connectivity that can be a replacement for the wired stuff?
Fantastic, yeah. They're a market leader in what they're doing, and although companies are relying on undersea cables at the moment, they do have to have a redundant solution on both, say, west and east, as well as another, whatever that other is, redundancy. At the moment, it's satellite solutions. So it's a third-party redundancy. So you got 1 cable, 2 cable plus a satellite to ensure spot beams solutions into Africa, which will really grow the economies in Africa. The problem is with licensing for Elon Musk's solutions. So licensing is not available in South Africa at the moment, but it is available in Mozambique and some other areas. So the moment those licenses become available, it will open up more solutions. Just regulatory problems at the moment.
Got it.
Matt, permit me to chime in here a little bit because of some of my experiences regarding this. So in addition to, helping to upskill and develop innovation across the continent, we currently decided to create a kind of like tech campus, and at full capacity, our tech campus will have about 10,000 people in there. And so for internet, we're literally having to create our own infrastructure because on the one hand, literally what Derek mentioned, a lot of times the government isn't able to provide those, and even where they exist, it's not so reliable. And so in our case, for example, for internet, we're able to get a fiber company to get fiber called Main One, into our hub in Abeokuta, which is just an hour out of the Nigerian financial capital of Lagos, and also use Starlink as a backup, such that at every point in time, especially when you say, okay, Africans are providing services to the global community expects that Africa will have the same level of infrastructure as is available everywhere else. And so for that reason, for us, for our tech campus, for example, we had to, get fiber, then get backup, literally also generate our own energy and several other things. So these are costs that gradually eat into profitability and so many other things. But these are areas where there has to be some kind of work between the government agencies as well as the private sector. Very, very important, especially for development. But I just thought to chime in there because of, what Derek was explaining with like real life, real world examples for us as well.
How do you make that
Thanks,
decision
Debo.
on making that investment? Like that's a big cost.
Yeah,
It
it's big
is.
money.
It is. It is. However, when you put that side by side with a lot of things, it's still lower. So just to speaking about the tech campus. So if you have a mid-level engineer in the US, I'm just using random example and just throw out some figures. And even when I say this, some people are like, nah, you can't find that. But you could have a mid-level engineer software person is earning about $100,000. You probably will not find that, but let's just assume for about $100,000. The reality is that you can have someone with the same set of skills who doesn't live or have to pay the kind of rent you would have to pay in the US at much, much lower cost, probably like 10% of that amount, and can also deliver on the same thing. So even if you add the cost of that infrastructure and the lack of that infrastructure and all that on a per capita basis, at worst, maybe it shifts it to 20%. So it's still much, much lower than what you would have in other continents. So just to provide some context.
Yeah, and the connectivity is an absolute necessity in that
Yeah.
format. Nihal, what do you have?
So now I was just thinking of Starlink. So they've just halved the price of Starlink here in Kenya. And so it's just starting at about $175 to buy the hardware, and about $35 for the monthly subscription. So, sometimes I'm listening at two different stories. Are we on the same continent? We also get, last 2 weeks, in fact, it was like sending emails out was almost like dial-up, because I think, the fibers were cut. But somehow this week seems to be okay, and that's good. But and I think in Kenya as well, we use a lot of we use a lot of bandwidth. In my company also, we're digitizing a lot. So COVID just spurred things on. I don't even know, because we just went from one digitization to another with no specific plan. We had no transformation, digital plan, whatever. We just say, hey, this looks good. Will it help us? Yes, let's get into it. And the next one and next one. And suddenly, looking down almost 4 years down the line, we're like, oh my God, I'm actually had to reduce people, but we're becoming a lot more productive as a result of that. Being in pharmaceuticals, there's lots of data. So did I cut off there? Am I still here? Am I still with you?
Yeah, we got you.
So yeah, we've got lots of data. We had about 2,000 square feet of just warehousing for documents. We've now hopefully we'll bring that down over the next few years to nothing. So yeah, one of the challenges we're also facing is, Derek mentioned this African free trade. So we were one of the first companies to be trialing the free trade agreement, because pharmaceuticals across Africa do not have custom duty, do not have taxes usually. And we're also the first company to be thrown out of the free trade agreement, simply because Nigeria, Ghana, and every other country now is looking at protecting and building their own sort of industries. So one of the big issues is, if I've got medicines in Kenya, I want to sell to Ghana, Nigeria, I can't. So again, and then who do we go to complain about this? We've no idea. It'll come out one day, maybe 10, 15 years down the line. So I don't know how well the African free trade area really works. But I do think the three trade blocks, ECOWAS, EAC, and SADC. So I know EAC is just, I think they took on Ethiopia and Somalia last couple of weeks ago. So we're now almost 500 million people. For me, that's a huge enough market to be, sitting over and handing over to the third generation. That's good enough. But we're also having a lot of cooperation now with SADC. So imagine now we've got two blocks who are now trading on a common basis, and because most of the countries have pretty much common English law, it's much more easier to go south than to go west for us. So that's something that we've just been thinking of the last couple of weeks. How do we go across Africa? Or do we just go south? And we decided, hey, we've got the EAC, we've got this 500 million people, and let's go south. So these were sort of the opportunities, and the digitalization is really needed in the industry just to keep up with the standards. We're not even looking to profit from it. We just need to make sure that we get to the WHO standards, we get to the European Union standards, South African standards. And the only way we can do that is through digitalization. So that's some of the top line opportunities and hindrances we have.
Great. Okay, so I think that's actually a really good transition for us to start thinking about. We outlined tremendous opportunity from a talent perspective within Africa, from a consumer-driven opportunity. We've talked about some of the challenges that we already see, like how do we provide education? How are we making sure energy happen? I'd love to go around and just talk about, like, hey, what's one of the barriers that you would like to see relieved in order to realize the potential that's here? Afam, let's start with you. What's a barrier that you'd like to see relieved to realize these opportunities?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many. Especially, I mean, we work exclusively in Nigeria, so I would just say, in terms of, one of our programs, we educate girls who have been affected by terrorism or gender inequality. And so amazing girls, put them in the schools, and then we educate them through late primary school through secondary school. They graduate, and then it's like, now what? And we're not a cradle to grave foundation. We can't then put them into university, give them a job. So creating high quality jobs. Nigeria's population is exploding. It's going to be the third or fourth most populous country, one of the youngest countries in terms of age in the world, and not enough jobs are being created. And that's going to be so dangerous for the country when you have all these youth who are graduating, who either leave the country and go to and take their skills and their talent potential and enrich the US, enrich the UK, enrich Europe, China, what have you. And Nigeria continue to wither. I'm sure it's happening in other African countries as well. Or there's going to be a bigger tilt towards violence and ethnic conflict, religious conflict, because you're going to be able to take all these out of work, mostly, young boys. We focus on girls, and have nothing else to do and are angry and frustrated. And so it's, how can we create these jobs? How can we tap in? I know they're kind of green shoots of technology and other industries coming into Africa, coming into Nigeria, but it has to grow at a much more dynamic pace, because we have so many young, bright, and we see it every single day, young, bright Nigerians, and in our case, Nigerians, who are ready to tackle something. They want to be doctors, they want to be lawyers, they want to be bankers, they want to be technologists, they want to get involved in AI, but they have so many girls who want to, what's AI? I've been reading about it. How do I get involved? And we have no answer for them, and so there has to be just almost like a Marshall Plan in terms of getting this happening in Nigeria, and I would imagine every other country in Africa.
Okay. Alice, what about you? What's a barrier that you would like to see relieved in order to realize the opportunities we're talking about?
Yeah. So for me, as someone in the supply aspect of things, I think that one of the barriers I would see removed, which is quite related to what Afam is saying, is a mismatch in access to infrastructure and connectivity. I believe that, just as Afam was saying, that the fact that young people in Africa do not even know where the future is projected towards in terms of the demand of skills and what even the kind of courses that they can choose that are towards the future demand of those specific skills are very important. And so these are some of the areas that are barriers or challenges that I would want to see being resolved.
And as you're thinking about, you're here in the US now working for the World Bank, how does, let's take me, I live in San Francisco Bay Area. How can I support some of the opportunities that are out there to relieve some challenges?
Yeah, I believe that there are a lot of grassroots engagements that take the form like impact investments in Africa within communities that are not served either by or reached by public systems. And so I think that those kinds of engagements are very critical. So for instance, myself, in terms of giving back, being one of the only women who have gone to school to get PhD from my community, in terms of a giving back impact project. I have an organization that works on providing education and career guidance for young people, especially because of the mismatch that we see that yes, people are going to school, people are getting the skills, but these skills are not matched towards the current demand and future demands of jobs. And so what I'm trying to do is to get these young people, rewire the communities to start thinking about STEM, to start thinking about innovation, entrepreneurship, creativity, in alignment with where the future is going towards in terms of jobs and access to reliable economic resources. And so for you, I believe that such identifying organizations that are making such impact and making investments in those organizations would really go a long way to solve some of the challenges that we are seeing now in ways that you cannot imagine unless you have given it a try to see what the impact looks like. Yeah, thank you.
Great. And Patrick, what's a barrier you'd like to see come down?
Yeah, so what Debo said about having to build his own infrastructure to get his technology center going really struck me, and that's really the big thing I see, because it's you cannot imagine how many people just spend enormous amounts of time, business people having to generate their own electricity on site. I mean, having to pipe in water and all kinds of, the basics they need. So you look at a business person in America, I mean, they drive to work and they flip on the switch and the lights come on and they have everything they need to run their business. But if you are running in a business in Africa, you are spending probably half of your time worrying about, all the basic things that we here in the rich world don't have to worry about. So that's a big source of friction for Africa's development, because we are not really spending time on the things we need to focus on. So and it's inefficient for everyone to buy a diesel generator to stick in their basement and generate power for. These things are better done on a big scale, because again, these are capital intensive, and it's government and it's private sector sort of funding that can build up these big infrastructure projects like roads, power systems, water systems, and so that's an area that needs a lot of focus on the continent.
Derek, what about you? What's a barrier you'd like to see come down?
So at the top of my mind is costly, unstable internet at the moment. There's definitely skills and training that needs to be done. I'm seeing a lot of work that could be done locally, outsourced to foreign countries, which could be done locally, and big salaries going off continent. There needs to be some cultural adoption to the technologies as well, so that there's an easy adoption to the skills and training. And most importantly, the regularity and standardization in each country. 52 countries have different rules to do business. So some sort of standardization.
Yeah, diversity is useful, but it can be hard when you've got 54 different rules that you got to figure out how to follow.
Yeah, so exactly.
Debo, tell us about a barrier you'd like to see overcome.
Well, the obvious one is infrastructure. Because literally, for us, technically we're building a new city, because when you have a place where you have 10,000 people, and it's live, work, so literally live, work, and relax, so recreation as well. So the obvious one I would really love to see lifted is from the infrastructure side. However, as with all things, especially when you're an entrepreneur, you find a way. You look for ways to turn the lemons into lemonade. And so that's what we're doing. And by extension, I like to think that the problem we at GFE are solving is actually that ability to get jobs, good quality, well-paying jobs for people. So a lot of times we look to government, but I've realized that we can partner with government, and where government does not exist, what just happens is that, you know, we kind of like find ways to provide those things in order to continue to grow. We can't keep on waiting for government. I guess in a weird way, innovation has always been ahead of regulation everywhere in the world. And so, you know, I think I can't remember who it was who talked about things around like innovating and jumpstarting and leapfrogging. We literally need to find innovative ways to continue to move ahead. And then I guess eventually regulation, infrastructure, some of these things will actually catch up. So this is this infrastructure, and then just providing jobs at scale, literally what we are now able to do. And I should say, I should have a discussion with Afam and Alice. All these young ladies and people that you're talking about, we're doing it. We've been able to now successfully get jobs for about 400,000 people. So providing jobs at scale is now our forte. So these are areas that, you know, concern me. Forgive me, I'll just add this last one, AI as well. AI has a big impact on us doing the things that we're doing, especially matching people, getting jobs and all of that. And so making sure that we're using AI for good from an African perspective as well, also knowing that a lot of the large language models and even the small language models that have existed prior to now kind of like have certain biases already built in. And so just making sure that things are done about that from an AI perspective, these are areas that, you know, I would love to, you know, to be addressed over time.
Excellent. Well, and part of the reason why we get you all together is so you can figure out ways that you can take advantage of opportunities. So that's good. I'm glad that you're going to follow up with Afam and Alice. Nihal, we'll close with you. You and I have talked in the past about capital constraints being a problem, but what's one of the constraints that you would like to see relieved to be able to recognize the opportunities for Biodeals and for Kenya overall?
Yeah, the last couple of years, I think all the entrepreneurs in Africa would have noticed is the dollars available, literally. You know, we've got a bill of $100,000, we get $5,000 a day. So that's the kind of capital constraints that are there. So that's the sort of the one part of it. The other part of it, like right now, we're doing some capital raise. Do I want $15, $20 million? And that money is available. That's quite easily available, especially on Kenya, especially on all the topics that we talk about, healthcare, education, tech. If you're doing any one of these three, in agriculture, if you're doing any one of these 3 or 4 sweet spots, there's tons of investments, especially in Kenya, Rwanda, coming in. And this is mainly because of the governance structures that both countries have. I'm talking of the two because we're really active in these two. So I kind of understand these two countries really well. Yeah, but the day-to-day dollars, customers not paying you right now. Okay, the government have not been paid us for 1 year, over $1 million. It's hurting us a little bit. So yeah, these are some of the big impediments which we face. And I think most companies have policies against that. And unfortunately, it does add to the inflation, sends up consumer prices because we add this risk into the products, into the pricing of the products. Right now, interest rates also going up. We were just last year, this time, we were about 10%, 11%, which is not bad for Africa. And today we're at 16 as the bank you go to. So yeah, it's just, and I think for Kenya and Rwanda, I don't think these are our economies not doing well. I think this is really the Fed rate going up. And then what we also noticed was the cycle of investments was pretty much ending at 2021, 22. So all the dollars were now being removed from the investments. The second cycle hadn't started for private equity. So, but I'm hopeful towards the end of next year, we should be back back in full of cash for most of the countries. Yep.
Good deal. Well, a couple things that I took away from today. We made it very clear there's a ton of opportunities out there, some barriers we got to overcome, but also, Afam, I take what you said very seriously. There's some urgency around this too. Like, how do we actually do this and work on it? And so today was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate all of you guys spending the time, sharing your opinions. And this is just the start, I would say. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, Matt, and
Thanks.
team, and
All right, bye.
Thank you.
Okay.